Thank you very much, Federico. Glad to be here. Thanks for all coming. We're not going to introduce ourselves again. I think that's been done. We can share the slides. Or maybe, Claire, you can quickly introduce yourself. Go on.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Claire Toomey. I work for Howden's Joinery. We're the #1 kitchen manufacturer to supplying the trade. And we have 4 manufacturing sites based in the UK. Our primary site's based in Howden in East Yorkshire, with a site in Runcorn and 2 further worktop sites as well. So diverse product mix, which gives us a number of significant challenges in decarbonising our business.
Thank you. And as Federico said, I run a company called ESG360. I'm the co-founder and CEO. And we are ESG360 risk management platform. And we're looking at the strategic impacts of ESG on business models and helping our esteemed clients like Howden's PLC, FTSE 100 company, understanding the impact of ESG throughout the value chain. So just to kind of start with the context, I think a lot of the professionals in this room will probably know that, but I just wanted to reiterate that. If you look at the chart on the right-hand side, most industries, the value chains are where the action is. And this is not just the emissions, this is also all the other ESG issues, although we are talking about purely emissions here, and the other issues get mixed up. But if you are in any of these industries, and Howden's are obviously one of them, and most of our clients are in this kind of in these type of industries, then we should not really be this information should not really be optional. This should be just like your financial accounting. So that's just maybe a question I'm posing, but at the context-wise, that unless these things are taken care of, nobody can be claimed to be net zero. Supplier engagement is probably one of the biggest opportunities and challenges facing organizations. So what we like to kind of share is give you an example, real life example, working with Howden's, that we've been digging deeper in their value chain. And if you look on the right-hand side, you have the end consumer, which buys the kitchen. Then if I'm going backwards, basically. And then you have the Howden's retailer. These are the depots Howden's have. Then we have the primary manufacturing. So Howden's obviously have major manufacturing in the UK. And then they have their key component supplier. You can term them as a tier 1 supplier. And then you have other suppliers which tend to be based overseas. So that tier 1 supplier, the key component supplier, could be based in the UK, could be based in Italy, could be based in Europe somewhere, for example. But the component suppliers and then the suppliers behind them are based overseas. And, this information has never been expected of them, so it's quite new. But at the same time, unless a company really gets to the end of it, you will never know the real data. And that's why we're all relying on estimations. And estimations we know are probably not correct. They're miles away, actually, from reality. So we're actually running a pilot with one of the key suppliers to Howden's, where we're collecting primary energy consumption data, scope 1 and 2, scope 3, category 4, 5, and 9, so upstream, transportation, waste, and downstream. And our platform then will calculate the emissions all the way down to the tier 4 supplier. We will have some challenges when we get to the raw material supplier, but I think the idea right now is what's happening is you've got 20% data is probably primary data, 80% is estimated. With this process we are proposing, you can get to 80% real data, primary data, and about 20% estimation data. So that's actually a pilot we're running with a couple of supply chains. And actually, this is providing a tool for a company like Howden's to really engage their supply chain, all the way down there.
So where do you start with your suppliers? So I'm going to give real-life examples. So for Howden's, we have over 250 direct suppliers and probably about 750 indirect suppliers. So we have taken the view that to engage our suppliers, we looked at the top 30 suppliers. So engaging them was and is a challenge. We had to select those that had the greatest impact on our business. That's revenue and material criticality. So if anybody knows the kitchens business, the cabinet is the core product that comes out of our organisation. So materials are timber and predominantly glues as well. So engaging our suppliers meaning that we had to make our engagement meaningful and effective. These are big organisations where, whilst we are a large FTSE 100 company, we are only 1% of their turnover. So we had to make the engagement meaningful and effective. So we engaged with all the key stakeholders, and that's everybody from senior leaders all the way through to those that are inputting and gathering the data. We've hosted conferences, Q&A sessions, on-site visits, Teams calls, Zoom calls. Obviously, lots of our suppliers are global, so we've had to run lots of different types of sessions to engage them. In addition to this, we have had to ensure that we've got good, strong governance structures to facilitate data collection, which is what Ange is talking to us about.
Thank you, Claire. So we have, three types of different suppliers are kind of appearing through this engagement process Howdens is going through. Although we're deploying our technology, the engagement is the key. Without engagement and governance, technology can do only so much. And I think that's the point I really wanted to reiterate, that your engagement with your supply chain is valuable, very valuable. So we have suppliers who have dedicated locations, manufacturing just for Howdens, for example. So they want to provide scope 1 and 2 data in the UK, but they also have supply chains behind them. The second type of supplier is where most of their business is towards your business. So we have a pilot customer now through Howdens. 70% of their business is to Howdens. So we're collecting kind of the revenue-based data, and we're also collecting the primary data from the value chain. And the third one is where they're just supplying a product. So we have a very large company, which, as you're saying, they are 10 times your size, but they are providing a very important product. And for them, you are an important client, even though revenue might be 1%. And they can actually supply detailed primary data, product level, going back all the way to tier 4. So this is, I think, and this is the result of engagement. Before engagement, it's just an estimation number, it's just an emission factor. This kind of becomes reality when you start digging. And this is then enforcing on those supply chains, all the suppliers, that this is not a optional data. This is a mandatory data. I mean, look at all the regulation which is coming. Howdens is a PLC. In the UK, you're committed to net zero. This is not an optional issue anymore. This is just like financial accounting. So I think this process is kind of helping with that.
So the challenges in collecting the data, so as Andrew's just said, it differs according to the supplier type. And I've outlined that on the previous table. So one of the key questions that we've had to ask is, what data do our suppliers have today? And let me tell you, some of them don't have a lot. We have to ask them, where are they focusing their efforts? Is it the same as what we want? What metrics are they working to? And where are the key hotspots that they're identifying within their own organisations? As Andrew said, we want real data, not estimates. There's loads and loads of estimated data out there. Ultimately, we want to ensure that our suppliers are realising that there will be multiple benefits for everybody within this. It's not just about Howdens want your data. And finally, in what information is necessary, we do need to think about what good looks like and therefore how the progress is then reported. So moving on to ensure how the integrity of the data, we have to check that the data is reliable or validated data. What we have established is that many people do not validate their data. They collect it and they use their own calculations. But what we do need is validation of data. And we have now made this mandatory in our organisation, so third-party validation. We can't rely on just maybe the account director who we would deal with. So going back to my previous point about engaging all stakeholders, it's making sure that we're working with procurement, HR, finance, where does the data come from? In addition to this, we are trying really hard to support and educate our suppliers. Many of these organisations don't have the right people in the right places, so we're trying to educate where we can. And finally, in integrity of the data, we need to make sure that what they can support us with can be replicated and is recurrent. So we are having to be adaptive and agile with all of our suppliers to make sure that we get the right data and the real data.
So is the emissions data enough? I mean, I know this is the Innovation Zero conference, but it's more than carbon, as we all understand, and so E, S, and G. What about the other data? A lot of suppliers are being asked various things. So the technology we're using, we provide avenue for suppliers to actually input data, which goes well beyond emissions. So we collect physical risk data. We can collect other sort of data as well. And at the same time, we have the capability, as we have, integrating some of their existing systems where they're collecting, data on your supply chain, on human rights, health and safety. We can integrate that data. So we're providing an ESG view of a supplier, because that would be necessary for any company with huge supply chains to be able to make credible decisions in the future. This is not going to be optional. One of the reasons I say that, I'll stop with the kind of joining the dots. There are a lot of regulation coming out. You've got now the TNFD is coming out, the Transition Plan Task Force, the CSRD, the ISSB. It's going to be no ending. And the challenge is those frameworks. If you start with ISSB, they're going well beyond just the carbon emissions. They're going to be asking a lot of this information. And as a company as Howdens, most of it is sitting in your value chain, for example, supply chain. So what I'm saying is it's great to set this governance structure now so your suppliers are used to this new world we all going to have to used to, because it's just like financial accounting. Industry group, what would you like to say?
So in establishing the industry groups, we are setting up industry collaboration groups. So, for example, taking maybe our 5 or top core suppliers and spending time with them and diving deep. So that means we will go and ask our suppliers to invite their tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers and take them on the journey, so that we have industry groups that can help one another, because nobody's going to be able to do this on their own. And as I said earlier, lots of people don't have the data. So it's about supporting and being collaborative. And we're on a journey. I know that many of my peers and competitors are also on the journey. So I'm very happy to ask field any questions that you have about how we are doing this.
So the last point I'm going to make is the technology. So technology is great. We have the platform, but as I said, engagement and the governance. Without that, I think there are limitations. So, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Question number 1 over there. Hope.
Hi there. It's a question for you. I just wondered, and apologies for this, whether you've assessed other platforms and whether to support you in doing this, and whether there's any sort of industry standard emerging, because there'll probably be a lot of competitor platforms to yours. I just wonder how that would all pan out for different corporates.
Thank you for the question. So in our journey in establishing the right platform for our organisation, we went through a huge due diligence process where we assessed the identification of the platform was actually done probably about 18 months ago. So we went through a huge due diligence process looking at who was available at that time and who had the right synergies with our business, and how we could mould and utilise the ESG360 platform to what we wanted for our business. And as Andrew's explained, the platform goes beyond just data. It will help us report. It will help us identify decarbonisation levers for our business as well as within our supply chain. So it was a big due diligence process that we went through.
Very well. We have time for a last question over here.
Hello, thank you. I'm just wondering, for suppliers tier 1 or tier 2, etc., that aren't willing to cooperate or you're struggling to engage effectively, how are you managing that process, and do you have a responsible exit strategy in those cases?
Great question. There are obviously lots of suppliers who don't have the data, so we will support as much as we can, but we do have within our supplier code of conduct a statement that clearly outlines that if we can't go on this journey or we really do struggle, we will need to look at our sourcing options are they the right supply partner for us. So we will do everything that we can to support the supplier, and that's not just, well, if you haven't got it, we're, see ya, but we will make sourcing decisions based on what they can supply.
Very good. Thank you very much for the presentation. We'll take a 5 minutes break and then be back with a talk about laundry's dirty footprint.